Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We're just going to give everyone a minute to log on, and then we'll get started. Alrighty. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get started as others are hopping on today. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Shannon von Felden with the Rare Disease Legislative Advocates Program here at the EveryLife Foundation. Just a reminder, we have closed captioning. Go ahead and click the live transcript button. Also, we do have Spanish translations. There's a link in the chat that you can click. So today we have a very full agenda. Thank you to all of our speakers for being here today. We have Melissa Goetz with the FCS Foundation to talk about the HEART Act, Dylan Simon with the EveryLife Foundation to give us some updates on state newborn screening legislation, Kylie Barber with the National PKU Alliance to give us an update on the Medical Nutrition Equity Act, Nicholas Manetto with Faegre Drinker to tell us a little bit about the Accelerating Kids Access to Care Act, and then Marc Yale with the International Pemphigus and Pemphigoid Foundation to talk about the Access to Rare Indications Act. And then I and Lindsey will have just a few announcements at the end. So hang in there today. Should only be about an hour. We'll try and keep it on time. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Melissa to share with us about the HEART Act.
Hi, great, thank you. I'm happy to be here and be able to talk to you all again about the HEART Act and some updates that we have had with that, as well as some ways that you all can help us continue to make progress moving forward. So a quick recap, I've been very lucky to be invited here. This is my third time with RDLA talking about the HEART Act since last summer when the HEART Act was first introduced to Congress with Congressman Paul Tonko, who I am a constituent of. So the HEART Act was reintroduced in February 2021. And this past May in 2021, we got FDA TA, which is technical assistance from the FDA, which basically means that they've reviewed the act, they've reviewed the different components of it, and they've provided their feedback on it. So there have been several serious discussions with senior committee staff within Congress, and everyone is starting to see a path forward where we're finding common ground and we're finding ways to really continue to move the HEART Act forward. And we are hoping to have good news on a Senate introduction soon in the next few weeks. So that is really exciting for us. And we've been working really hard in the last year, having meetings and conversations to really continue to move that forward. The bill helps all of rare, not just FCS, although it stemmed from our experience with the FDA. It was in talking with other rare disease groups who had experienced some of the things that we had that I'll go over in the next slide that made us realize that we needed to put something comprehensive together, which is why we're so grateful to have the Haystack Project supporting it and working with us to continue to move it forward. So really what we're asking today is that we need help to add co-sponsors, and we need our staff in Congress to hear from you, to know that you support the HEART Act and that this will have an impact on all rare disease groups. And you can support that by going to haystackproject.org/act-now. And there's a form there that you can fill out that will just go straight to your congressperson. It will figure out who that person is, if you don't know who it is, and just let them know that this is really important to you and that they should support it. So there's 5 elements to the HEART Act, and these were things that we encountered in our experience with the FDA. So as we were getting ready to have a drug approved, and we were really hopeful, there is no current treatment for FCS. Patients have to follow a really strict low-fat diet, about 10 to 15 grams of fat a day. And I like to say a tablespoon of olive oil has about 12 grams of fat. So think about how many times you might swirl the pan with some olive oil. So that's not in a diet for an FCS patient. And that's why treatment for us is really important, and we were so hopeful and excited. And in working with the FDA, we realized that there were some roadblocks that should not be roadblocks when working with rare disease communities. So what we're asking is that advisory committee meetings must include rare disease or small sample experts to review data. Some of these you might be looking at and saying, well, that must already happen, but it doesn't, because we learned firsthand that unfortunately we had to be very specific to ask for these things. And in hindsight, at times we did not, and we feel like we really missed out on an opportunity for the FDA to understand our rare disease. So, including rare disease, small sample experts to review data is very important to us. Including patient input when assessing risk-benefit analysis or risk evaluation and mitigation strategies. As rare disease patients, we know that we are willing to perhaps tolerate more risk, or we are willing to experience different side effects that maybe the larger population would not. But regardless, patient input should be considered. Include rare disease expertise throughout the entire process of drug evaluation. So making sure that there's someone who's really connecting with the patients, really understanding the disease, and really understanding what those hardships are. Be accountable to report to Congress on how many rare disease drug applications each division sees each year. And that's just so that we can gauge how much experience each division has, because there are going to be certain divisions within the FDA that see more rare disease applications. They might feel more comfortable working with small sample studies, things of that nature. And then there are divisions within the FDA that do not see any rare disease applications. So just to have a good understanding of which divisions within the FDA might need more support, as well as require a GAO study, or a Government Accountability Office study, to see how the EU review and approval process differs for rare disease patients. Rare diseases, so patients know what to ask for, as well as perhaps being able to use that data within the US just to increase those sample sizes. And it's important to note that the drug that has not been approved for FCS in the United States was approved in Europe. And so we struggle with that a little bit, because it means that our counterparts in Europe have access to treatment that those of us living in the US do not have access to. So again, the link down there is where you can go to contact your congressperson, and you can just fill that information in right when you get to that website. So how did we get to the HARD Act? This has been quite a few years now in the works. Between February 2017 and August 2018, that was when we were kind of in the trenches of hoping to have this drug approved. And they were very open to having conversations with us. We were at the FDA. We had patient meetings with them where we were able to share our story. And it felt like they were very open to a two-way dialogue. And then when we had those, one or two meetings, it felt like the boxes were checked, and our access to discussions with the FDA were cut off. We were frustrated because we had a lot of answers to the FDA's questions and concerns regarding our disease state and our drug, and there was no channel for us to get those answers to them, nor was there consideration given to the access that we had to those answers. We realized talking to the FDA early was not the same as talking to them while they're reviewing an application. So we spoke to them before they reviewed the data and before they had access to all that. In hindsight, we realized that dialogue should have been occurring throughout the entire process. So for that year and a half, we should have been having regular check-ins with them, or meetings with them, or with that rare disease expert, someone to share and to share concerns, and then to share our patient experience with them. When the drug was not approved, we were angry and we were heartbroken, and much of our community felt, back to being hopeless and like there would not be any relief for them. So we started emailing our congressperson to share what had happened, not knowing where it could lead, but just feeling like we had to do something. And, the response from the Congress people we contacted was that we weren't alone or the first rare disease groups to have these concerns and these issues. And so from there, we met with the Haystack Project and started canvassing congressional offices and other patient groups and FDA experts, and really kind of use the HARD Act to put towards what we were looking to accomplish. And it's been very exciting to see it all come together. I think the rare disease community has been excited about it. And now in this final push, we just really need your support in contacting your elected officials to let them know that they should support the HARD Act and that it's important to you and it matters to you, and that we can really make a difference with it. So we just need your help. So if you can, just head to that website and just, again, voice your support. We would appreciate that. And you can contact me. I can put my contact information in the chat if you have any questions or you'd like to talk more about it. I would love to do that. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Melissa. And next we have Dylan.
Great, thank you guys. Again, my name is Dylan Simon. I am the Newborn Screening and Diagnostics Policy Manager at the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases. I want to talk to you a little bit today about our state newborn screening legislation. Next slide, please. So just a couple general facts about newborn screening and the importance behind it. So newborn screening reaches each of the 4 million newborns born in the US every year. And actually 1 in 178 newborns has a condition that can be detected through newborn screening. Newborn screening tests for a variety of conditions, whether genetic or metabolic. And really the key part of newborn screening is that it facilitates the timely delivery of life-saving treatment and other therapies that can really bring an improvement to the quality of life. Next slide, please. And when talking about newborn screening, it's really important to address the state aspect of it all, because while there is federal legislation that we do advocate for, so much of newborn screening does occur at the state level. And so while there is a federal recommended panel, it is still a state-by-state decision on which condition each state screens for. It is still a state decision on if there is an advisory council or not, how they're going to pay for it exactly. And so all of that, all of those decisions come down to the state level. And so it's really important to advocate to the state programs to ensure the fact that not only are you advocating to add conditions, but also advocating that the program is supported how it needs to be supported. Because newborn screening is more than just a test itself. It is a full program, and a great example of that is the follow-up service. And so making sure that the testing and the follow-up service can work hand in hand, and all of that occurs and all that's decided at the state level and varies state to state. So it's always important to note that while there is a federal newborn screening policy, a lot of the final decisions are made at the state level, and a lot of great advocacy can be done at the state level. And because of that, we tend to focus on our RUSP alignment legislation. And so the RUSP, which stands for the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel, is the federal recommended panel. And to get on that panel, you have to develop a package. That development is often led by patient advocacy organizations, and it can take 5, 10, 15 years. And that's a heavy lift and it's a heavy ask for these patient advocacy organizations, but one that they happily make. And the approval process is a very science-based, evidence-driven process. And so it's the belief of the EveryLife Foundation that if patient advocacy organizations are going to be putting in all that effort to develop this evidence-based package, that once it is finally added to the RUSP, we should work to help those patient advocacy organizations, because as of right now, once it's been added to the RUSP, those same patient advocacy organizations then have to go state to state to then advocate to those individual state legislators or state programs to add that condition to their screening panel. And so the RUSP alignment legislation is a way around that issue. So first and foremost, it requires the state to screen for any disorder recommended by the federal RUSP. That does not preclude adding conditions that are not on the RUSP, but it does ensure the fact that any condition that has gone through that rigorous process of getting added to the RUSP is added to the state panel. The way I like to refer to it is we want to view the RUSP as the minimum, not the goal. And so this ensures the fact that any state that passes this legislation will screen for any condition on the RUSP. In addition, it implements a timeline for when the state needs to begin screening for a new RUSP disorder. We recognize that you can't immediately add a condition to a panel once it's been added to the RUSP. The state programs have to identify how they're going to pay for it, do the new machines, new staffing, ensure the fact that when they get the machine that it's working properly, that they know how to properly run the test and how to properly educate and follow up on the issue. So we understand that all that takes time to implement. However, currently that time, the average time to add any condition to the RUS or adding condition to the state panel following condition to the RUS is 5 to 6 years. And so we believe that is too long. And so we understand it takes some time. We think 5 to 6 is too long. And so we tend to advocate for approximately a 2.5-year timeline, which gives the states enough time to take all those steps to ensure that they can receive the funding, get the machine, get the education they need on the new condition so that they can properly implement the newborn screening for that new RUS disorder. In addition, our RUS alignment legislation ensures that there's funding available moving forward to facilitate the addition of new screens and conditions. Essentially, if we're going to require them to screen for a condition, and if we're going to require them to do it in a certain amount of time, we want to ensure that there's funding available to make all that happen. And a really key part of this legislation is that it's going to vary state to state. And so you can see your left, and this year we are advocating for this legislation in 3 different states. And none of those 3 pieces of legislation look the same. And that's because state government, state legislations they're going to vary by state. And so we don't want to go in with a single piece of paper and say, please pass this piece of legislation. We go in with these elements, these themes, these core principles, and then work with the state advocates and the state labs to really identify what works best for that state. And so this year we did pursue this legislation in these 3 states. We're really excited about that, and I can give you a quick update. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, Georgia. We're really excited about this. The legislation was signed into law on May 4th. We actually had pursued Georgia in 2020, but due to the pandemic, the assembly was suspended before we could get it full passage out of the state Senate. So we were returned this year, and thanks to our advocates and all the effort, we were actually able to see it signed into law earlier this year. In addition, Ohio, the language was included within the budget, which is always an avenue to get legislation passed. And our version of the version that works for Ohio for RUS alignment language was included and passed in both the House and the Senate. So we're currently awaiting passage of the Senate version in the State House, and we're really hopeful for that, and that has to be done actually within the next couple of weeks. So we'll have an update hopefully soon on that. In North Carolina was a unique effort this year, and so North Carolina we only had to pass one aspect of it, and so we just had to implement a timeline. And so we went in and tried to ensure that that part would get added, and it originally passed out of the State House of Representatives 111-1. And we're currently awaiting scheduling in the state Senate. The state Senate had to schedule over 700 bills that were passed out of the House. And so we're just kind of waiting our time in the queue. And we are confident that we'll get added to the schedule, and we definitely have high hopes that we can see the passage out of the state assembly and get signed into law as well. I think that is it for me. Yes, thank you everybody for listening. I see there's a question, so I'm going to take a quick look at that and then answer that.
Dylan, do you want to, it's a question about the timeline, which might be helpful,
Yep.
Whether the state has to start screening 18 months after the condition is added to the RUSP, or just start considering adding the condition.
So 18 months is, so it's more the second part. They have to consider it within 18 months. That is based off of their state constitution. They are not allowed to just adopt anything that the federal government says. There has to be some sort of state vote on the issue. What the legislation does is it takes it out of the state assembly and moves it to the newborn screening program and the newborn screening advisory committee, who is populated by experts in the field and patient advocates, as well as they have quarterly meetings. And so you can local patient advocates can go advocate at those meetings for the addition. So this is similar to what we passed in Florida. And so within the 18 months, it must be considered. And then once it is considered and hopefully and assumingly added, the state then has another year to fully implement. So meeting that 2.5-year timeline, and that final year is really to ensure the funding side of it all. So once it has been added, it then gives a year to then start to collect the funds and get the appropriations required to implement that addition.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I don't think that there were any other questions, but folks can feel free to reach out to Dylan, and he'll answer any questions you have. So next we're going to move on to Kylie on the Medical Nutrition Equity Act.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. I feel like it's been quite a long time since I've been here. But like Shannon said, my name's Kylie Barber, and I am the Medical Foods Policy Associate with the National PKU Alliance in partnership with the EveryLife Foundation. Okay, so I am here today with some very exciting news. We have finally reintroduced the Medical Nutrition Equity Act of 2021. And for those who are unfamiliar with the Act, it is a bill to provide for the coverage of medically necessary food and vitamins and individual amino acids for digested and inherited metabolic disorders under federal health programs and private health insurance, as well as to ensure state and federal protection for existing coverage and for other purposes. So a little bit about this bill. It's bipartisan and bicameral. We've introduced it both into the House and the Senate, again, with bipartisan support. The House bill is HR 3783, and our House champions are Representative Jim McGovern, who is the Democrat from Massachusetts, and Representative Jamie Herrera Butler, who's the Republican from Washington State. And then over in the Senate side, we have Senate Bill 2013. Our champions are Senator Bob Casey, who's Democrat from Pennsylvania, as well as Senator Joni Ernst, who is the Republican from Iowa. And so the priority right now for the Medical Nutrition Equity Act is to garner as many co-sponsors as possible before August 1st. And then at that point, depending on how many co-sponsors we have, we may be looking to attach it to a larger vehicle. So what exactly does the Medical Nutrition Equity Act do? So again, it provides coverage under federal health programs and private insurance for the treatment of both children and adults with certain digestive and inherited metabolic disorders, including PKU. So the products that it provides coverage for include medically necessary foods, including formulas and low protein modified foods, vitamins and amino acids, as well as the equipment and supplies that are required to administer the medically necessary foods. Another update that this legislation provides is it actually amends TRICARE to provide coverage for aminoglobin E or non-aminoglobin E mediated food protein to the list of covered conditions, as well as it basically just provides a federal floor for coverage. We wanted to make sure that this legislation did not preempt more rigorous state laws that may exist. So if you live in a state law or in a state that has great coverage for medical foods, the Medical Nutrition Equity Act would not take away from that. It would just, again, provide that federal floor to elevate other states. Okay, next slide. Perfect. Okay, so who is covered under the Medical Nutrition Equity Act? So the term covered disease or condition includes inherited metabolic disorders, including those listed on the RUSP of the newborn screening, medical and surgical conditions of malabsorption, again, aminoglobin E and non-aminoglobin E mediated allergies to food proteins, as well as certain digestive conditions, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and any other disease or condition that will be determined by the HHS secretary. And if you're looking to see if a specific condition is covered, more details are provided in the actual text of the legislation. And you can also look it up on the Patients and Providers for Medical Nutrition Equity Coalition at nutritionequity.org. Next slide, thank you. Okay, so what exactly are these mysterious medical foods? And I get this question a lot, especially as I'm educating legislators up on the Hill. The issue is whenever somebody hears food, they automatically assume normal groceries that you can get at a grocery store. But if you're familiar with the issue, you know that couldn't be further from the truth. So the term medically necessary food means food including low protein modified food products, an amino acid preparation product, a modified fat preparation product, or a nutritional formula that is furnished pursuant to the prescription, order, or recommendation of a qualified healthcare professional. So these medical foods must be overseen and prescribed by a doctor or again, a qualified medical healthcare professional. as well as a specialated formula and processed product for the use of feeding by means of oral and enteral intake. And also, these are intended for the dietary management, which cannot be achieved by modifying a normal diet. Again, requires medical supervision. These medical foods do not include gluten-free products, foods for diabetics, or foods that are naturally low in protein, like normal groceries, etc. Next slide. So some updates and some strengthening components to the new piece of legislation in 2021 includes that it highlights the out-of-pocket impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on patients and their families who require medically necessary nutrition. It also requires the secretary to consult the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, as well as other scientific entities, to determine whether or not a condition will be added to the list of covered conditions. It also specifies that medical equipment and supplies necessary to administer such food is covered on a needs basis. Again, also establishes that coverage applies to patients with the specified conditions that are delineated in the legislation versus sort of a broad generalization due to therapeutic or chronic medical necessity. So our intent was to make sure that this legislation was narrow and focused. And then if a condition does need to be added to the legislation, that it would go through a rigorous process and be determined by the secretary. Okay, next slide. And that is all I have for you. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat or send me an email.
Great, thank you, Kylie. I don't see any questions for you. Oh,
let's see.
There's one question about whether the MNEA extends to coverage in hospitals and institutions.
Let's see. So that's a good question. I think the definition for medical foods as it pertains to this legislation is pretty narrow. And so my gut reaction to your question is no. But if you shoot me an email, I can do some more research on that. But I think we are pretty narrow as far as the definition of medical foods. I don't think it includes what you asked.
All right, thank you so much. Next, we have Nick to talk about the Accelerating Kids Access to Care Act.
Thanks, Shannon. Good to see everyone today. So Nick Manetto here to talk about the Accelerating Kids Access to Care Act. Go to the next slide. So just full disclosure, this is work that we have been leading and doing on behalf of our client, Boston Children's Hospital. It's got very strong support of about 80 or so organizations on our current endorsement list, but disclosing this is whom we're leading the work for. So quick overview here as an issue that I'm sure many of you are very familiar with, but this is bipartisan legislation led by Congresswoman Catherine Clark and Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler, and Senator Chuck Grassley, Senator Michael Bennet, Senator Rob Portman, and Senator Sherrod Brown. Good bipartisan bicameral legislation that at the core would establish a streamlined pathway that providers treating children on Medicaid or CHIP from another state can use to be screened and then more easily enroll in other state Medicaid programs without having to undergo additional screening requirements. We're really trying, the goal here is to seek to enhance access to care while retaining important program integrity safeguards and also respecting the state-by-state variations to Medicaid and CHIP programs, including the decisions to authorize out-of-state care and how much to pay for such care. So really addressing a small but important piece of the process that can often delay or impede access to care. Next slide, please. So overview. So what is the problem again that we're trying to address here? So again, as this community really knows well, kids with complex conditions who are in Medicaid or CHIP may often need a level of care that cannot be provided by providers in their home state. And when this occurs, the state Medicaid agency and or the managed care plan will make that determination in concert with the children's health care providers for the child to go receive care at a state. Current law and regulations permit states to use provider screens that are done by another state Medicaid agency or by Medicare, but what we've found out is that often in reality, this does not happen. And you have a lot of state-by-state variation in processes, some of which can be very time-consuming and burdensome, and in some cases, in the worst situations, delay that access to care when the providers are already screened and enrolled in their own state program, in some cases Medicare and other states. So it's one of those great examples of a burden that really isn't having any impact in keeping a bad person out of the program, but really at the end of the day is delaying access to care, creating a burden on the families and the providers, and also on the agencies and plans when the child can sometimes become sicker and in need of more intensive care if that care is delayed. Next slide, please. This is just a list of the many types of challenges that we have collected from children's and other children's hospitals and others who have been impacted by this, including by families. Not going to go through each of these here, but the point here is that you have a lot of different burdens and challenges that need to be addressed here when it comes to accessing and accessing this care, and we're trying to address through creating this pathway. Next slide, please. So again, the legislation here would work by creating this streamlined pathway for eligible providers to voluntarily use if they wish to do so. This is not at all a mandate. This is not requiring providers who fit the eligibility criteria. If they wish to use it, they may. If they are screened successfully, then they will not have to go through other screenings to enroll in other state Medicaid programs if called upon. If a provider doesn't wish to go through this, then and has a case that comes from another state, then they would have to navigate and negotiate what that state is asking them to do. In terms of eligibility, so we're looking at this in a fairly defined sense. You have to be enrolled in good standing in your own Medicaid program or in Medicare. You have to be in the lowest category for risk, and that's as defined by CMS. You have to be, again, enrolled in good standing in your program in Medicare and be providing care to a qualifying individual. So a qualifying individual would be both a child, as well as we made sure the most recent version of the legislation is amended to reflect children, but also adults if they're being treated for a condition that onset during childhood, as we are well familiar with many cases where the care is often still an out-of-state situation or even in a children's hospital setting, given the nature of certain conditions. So wanted to make sure we're covering that population as well. The legislation very clearly does not address the authorization of this care, nor the payment rates for out-of-state care. Again, the decision to authorize care remains with the state Medicaid agency and the plan. The payment is negotiated based on the plan or state and the receiving hospital. This again means that the states and MCOs will continue to be tasked with making those decisions and negotiating, where the care ultimately goes. So we're not getting into those two topics. We're really trying to make this about this, again, important chunk in the middle when it comes to provider screening and enrollment. And while this does certainly have many similar themes to the ACE Kids Law, we are talking about this in the context of the Medicaid program, whereas ACE is, as I think all of you know, much larger effort. Next page, next slide. So where are we at right now in the process? We've had very strong bipartisan interest in this legislation. We're grateful, of course, Chairman Emeritus Grassley is our Senate lead. We continue to enjoy very strong support from the committee staff on both Energy and Commerce and Finance. The legislation was sort of in the mix at the end of last year, but ultimately didn't get over the goal line. So we're hoping that with the earlier introduction now, we are working with some improved timing here and the process to basically make sure we're hitting all the gates that need to be hit to be in position for movement. We also continue to have very positive commitments from administrations going back to the end of the Obama administration, to the Trump administration, now the Biden administration on this issue. We have had our most recent conversation with the Office of the Secretary just a couple of weeks ago, and they continue to be very enthusiastic about what we're trying to do here. And hopefully we're seeing some good signals for technical assistance and other content in the near future. This is also very consistent with work that CMS is already doing in terms of a pilot screening program, as well as work that CMS is doing to expand their current Medicare physician enrollment system, which is known as PICOS, to be able to support multiple programs, and including Medicaid. So very much aligning with what CMS has been doing in recent years and what HHS is doing. So we're hoping that that's going to lead to some positive outcomes when it comes to TA. Next slide. And then this is just a few, again, how we can help. Certainly welcome endorsements of the bill. We're fortunate to have about 80 groups already, provider, patient advocacy, specialty groups and the like on a stakeholder letter, asking for co-sponsorship, of course, ongoing work that we're all going through. A number of the children's hospitals are working on that right as we speak, and encouraging activity at the right time later this year. Again, we're continuing to talk with finance and energy and commerce staff regularly, and the hope is that we can move this one forward this Congress. And I think that's about it. The last slide is just a few resources, some recent publications and articles on this topic.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate you being here. I don't see any questions, so I think we're just going to move on, but thank you so much for being here today. Alrighty. So I think we're making good time today. Marc, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody, and thanks to the RDLA for allowing me to speak about the Access to Rare Indications Act. My name is Marc, and I'm the Advocacy and Research Coordinator for the IPPF. Next slide, please. So I'm going to provide a little bit of context and background on access to rare indications. So when people go to the doctors and they purchase insurance, they really expect to have access to the treatments and the drugs that are really considered medically necessarily and medically acceptable. If they wouldn't go to the doctor and have health coverage to begin with, then they wouldn't, they wouldn't go to the doctor to get that to begin with. So in order for a drug to be considered medically acceptable by payers, it must either be on label or which means that it is approved for a specific indication, or it needs to be on one of two drug compendia. And the drug compendia are lists that payers use to determine coverage. So because there's over 7,000 rare diseases and only about 5% of them have FDA approval for therapies, most of the drugs used are not even approved and are considered off-label. In fact, current laws and regulations and general practice limit access to rare disease treatments, particularly in Medicare Part D, Medicaid, and also in the private insurance market. So surprisingly, off-label drugs are either not on the compendia or don't even have a chance of making it on the compendia at all, because the compendia are, number one, not updated regularly or consistently, and new therapies are often not even on the compendia. There are also lots of discrepancies of accepted therapies between the two different compendia. So a drug might be on one compendia, but not on the other. And the oversight and management of the compendia is not very transparent. In fact, there are lots of paywalls in place, so patients have difficulty getting access to the actual compendia. So most people don't even know what even is on the compendia. The only people that see that are the insurance companies and the physicians or clinicians. And then lastly, the treatment options listed in the compendia are incomplete, outdated, and very unpredictable. So this legislation will expand the definition of what is considered medically acceptable to include evidence of off-label use therapies from clinical guidelines and the standard of care in rare diseases. So even more problematic is the reality that for some people with rare diseases, there may only be one drug to treat them, and that's the only standard of care. Without any chance of ever being on the compendia, there is no access for these people at all. In other cases, people are often forced to use step therapy. And I know everyone is familiar with step therapy protocols. Since their drug is more efficacious and is not on label or on compendia, and so therefore they don't have access to it. So imagine this, you go to the doctor, your doctor prescribes the medication that they feel is best to treat you. After a long pre-authorization process the doctor has with the insurance company, the payer sends you a letter 7 to 10 days later stating that the treatment that you thought was going to improve your health was denied because it's off-label or it's not on the compendia. Then it's up to your doctor to appeal and prove to the insurance company that what they prescribed is the standard of care and that you should be getting this life-saving drug. After your doctor has spent countless hours on the phone with your insurance company, providing them with their case, your appeal is denied again. Then it's up to you to appeal in front of an administrative law judge. At this point, because the drug is not on the compendia, you try to find evidence to substantiate the use of the drug in your condition. All of the literature is difficult to access. The prospect of potentially hiring a lawyer and the cost of the anxiety is just not even worth it. So what do? You give up. The delay in treatment has made your condition worse. Your care is now dictated by your insurance company, not by you and your doctor. This is happening right now somewhere in America to somebody in your patient community. Next slide. So the IPPF went to CMS to discuss this issue with the American Academy of Dermatology in December of 2019. And they haven't responded to our calls for change. We decided to get the law changed, and a bill was introduced in the 116th Congress as HR 8467, but it really needs to be reintroduced. We are working on finalizing leads in the Energy and Commerce Committee, as well as Ways and Means, and we plan to reintroduce the bill after July 4th, but we really need your help to get the bill reintroduced. Next slide. So I'm asking you today to please contact your representatives and ask them to support the Access to Rare Indications Act. Please also ask your community to act now and contact their representatives to support the Access to Rare Indications Act by going to the link that I provided here, and it's also in the chat. And you know, we just need your help to remove the barriers to access for people with rare conditions. So thank you everybody for your time, and I'll take questions if you have them.
Thank you, Marc. I am checking to see if there were any questions for you. I don't see any. Seems it's been very comprehensive. I appreciate it. So
Thank you.
It's great to see Marc. Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers. We made great time today. I have a few announcements about Rare Disease Week, and then Lindsey has an announcement about the Rare Artists Program. The deadline to register, especially if you want to participate in the virtual Hill meetings the week of July 20th, is tomorrow. So please make sure to register if you haven't already. Today or tomorrow at the latest at rareadvocates.org/RDW. As you all know, we will have a number of events that we would normally have if you all were coming to DC in person, and we will host these all virtually during the week between July 14th and July 22nd. And start out that with the Rare Disease Caucus briefing, do the legislative conference, some special events geared to our young adults, the virtual Hill meetings, and then we'll be closing out Rare Disease Week with the different diversity roundtables. Also, if you do register for Rare Disease Week, we have webinars that you will need to register for separately. And again, the link is also on the rareadvocates.org/RDW website to do that. So if you've never attended Rare Disease Week or need a refresher, or since things are going to be looking a bit different since it'll be virtual, I highly recommend that you attend our first training next week on June 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern. If you've never been to Rare Disease Week, You may be interested in attending our new attendees webinar. That'll give you more opportunities to ask questions and to learn a little bit more ahead of that week. And then, of course, we will host our Fast Forward for Rare Practice Your Pitch webinar again on July 8th, which I think has been a really useful and actually kind of fun webinar to participate in if you haven't already done so. And then just to keep things interesting for Rare Disease Week and to support the rare disease community, we are going to, the EveryLife Foundation will be making grants between $1,000 to $5,000 to rare disease organizations following Rare Disease Week. So if you're interested in helping an organization receive one of these grants, I highly recommend participating in Rare Disease Week, earning points during the week by attending events, your virtual Hill meetings, and other activities. And the top 50 point earners will win one of these grants for their organization of choice. Lindsey, you want to take it away and share about Rare Artist?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? And then I'm just waiting for my video to pop up.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, am I on video or no? Great, all right. Well, hi everyone. Thanks so much. So looking forward to Rare Disease Week. I missed it last year, so I'm really excited for this year, and I love that grant edition. Hope everyone is as excited as I. But today I am here to pop in just to tell you all about Rare Artist. As most of you know, advocacy takes on many different forms. So if you're an advocate who has a creative bug, we invite you to check out the Rare Artist program at EveryLife. This will be our 11th year in a row of offering the Rare Artist Contest to the community. And this is an opportunity for anyone who is touched by the rare ecosystem to share their advocacy stories through art. The 2021 Rare Artist Contest is currently open for submissions, and we've got a ton of exciting changes to the contest this year. We have a new contest platform and acquired a company called Award Force to host our contest this year. So we are no longer accepting submissions through Facebook or email entry. We heard the community was ready for a change with the submission process, so we acquired a new contest platform. Very excited about that. We've also changed some of the structure of the contest so that we have an opportunity to work with 20 finalists and offer some individualized advocacy coaching to help prepare folks for the public vote. So that is completely new, of which the community will be able to vote on during the month of October and make a final decision on our 10 awardees who will receive cash prizes and have a chance to showcase their artwork in Washington, D.C. next February, when we will hopefully be able to host our in-person Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. If you want to learn more about the Rare Artist Contest, head over to rareartist.org. I'll post that in the chat here in a minute. Or if you're ready to submit your art piece today, please go directly to our contest platform. That's rareartist.awardsplatform.com to start your profile today. I'll also post that link here in a sec. And the deadline to enter is July 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So don't wait on it. And I look forward to hearing your advocacy stories and seeing some nice artwork come through. Thanks, Shannon.
Great, thank you, Lindsey. I appreciate that. We did have a question, which, do we have this information in Spanish by any chance?
We do not currently, but I can absolutely work on that. That's a great question and something we plan on incorporating. I'm just not sure if we have that set in stone for this year, but we can get that going. Thanks for that question.
Great, yes, thank you. Perfect. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat. So thank you everyone for joining us today. If you do have any questions about Rare Artists or Rare Disease Week, please feel free to reach out to myself or Caitlin or Lindsey, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have. And we will not be having our monthly webinars next month because of Rare Disease Week, or in August because that's just how Washington, D.C. works. So we will see you all again in September, September 16th at noon Eastern Standard Time. If there are topics you would like to learn more about or would like to present on, please feel free to reach out to me or Caitlin as well. We are always very open to new ideas to help you all better. And of course, thank you to all of our partners for today's webinar. Thank you everyone so much for being here. Thank you to our speakers, Marc and Nick and Melissa and Kylie and Dylan. Thank you all for being here today. And I look forward to seeing you all at Rare Disease Week soon. So thank you very much. Have a great one.